Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 12 team selection where I've got 2 free transfers and need to do some planning with my team. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, FPL is finally back after the international break, and I am finally back as well. And if you're wondering why I was giggling so much at the start of the video, I honestly attempted that intro about 15 times and kept getting it terribly wrong. And that was honestly the best attempt. So I just thought, do you know what, I'll leave it there. And if you are wondering where I've been with, there's been no FPL therapy, no videos, and you've not seen my posts on social media, I sadly have been very, very ill. I mean, you might be able to tell because I've lost 4.5 kilos in 6 days. I'm looking very slim. But yeah, it's been a pretty rough 6 days, honestly. I wish I was sunning it up during the international break. But yeah, just been very, very ill, sadly. I was going to try and rush myself back on like Wednesday, Thursday. But honestly, thanks to you guys, there were hundreds, if not thousands of lovely comments across all of the socials just saying, Ross, take a break, put your health first. So I decided not to rush back on Wednesday, Thursday. And I waited until I was back at a point where I had more energy. I could actually come with a genuine smile on my face. And I've had a bit more time to think about FPL and my team as well. So I've not come unprepared to the video. But do bear with me if it's a little bit more chaotic than normal. And if my presentational skills are lacking somewhat, I'm just getting back into it and I'm just getting the energy back to sort of present again and be there for you like I should be. So thank you again for all of the wonderful words. No more about me being ill, but that's why I haven't been here. And that's why I have missed a couple of uploads, which I don't like doing, but we are back now. So for Game Week 12, I'm actually pretty excited for this run now, right? So Game Week 12 to sort of Game Week 19, 20, we've got something like 9 game weeks in the space of like 6 weeks or something like that. So it's just constant FPL, constant Premier League. I love this point of the season because this is when you can make up such a large amount of rank in a small amount of actual time because there are just so many game weeks coming thick and fast. People be missing deadlines or picking rotation picks. And this is when, if you are planning well and picking the right players, you can shoot up the ranks. And it's usually the point in the season, fingers crossed, that I tend to do quite well too. So I'm very excited for it. And this is the start of it. We've spoke about Game Week 12 for so long with all of these fixture swings coming for certain teams. That being said, I don't even know if I'm going to make a transfer this week, but I do have 2 free transfers to use, 0.2 million in the bank, and my team is currently rated at 97% according to Fantasy Football Hub. And by the way, there is a link down below in the description. Not only do they still have the 30% off if you use my link, but there's also a 30-day free trial. So click the link in the description, check it out, and if you do want to have access to Fantasy Football Hub, now is probably the best time you're going to have for a while to sign up. So, in goal, this is why I bought Sanchez. So I bought Sanchez a couple of weeks ago, knowing that I could play Fabianski for a couple of weeks. And then from 12 and beyond, I have Sanchez to come in. And this is it right now. And Fabianski getting me that 9-pointer last week just further justified the pick of Sanchez. Now, if I could go back, would I have picked Sanchez? I still think if I was on a wildcard this week, Sanchez would be my second favourite keeper to go for. So if you are wildcarding, by the way, I'll try and get a wildcard draft in the second video today because it's double upload day. So the second video today, the deadline decisions, I'll try and get a wildcard draft in that. But I think my 2 goalkeepers that I'd be choosing between is Verbruggen and Sanchez. And I think I probably would go Verbruggen now because he's a bit cheaper. And Sanchez is just a bit stinky, isn't he? He makes a lot of mistakes. And I think the good thing for Sanchez is the backup for Chelsea, Jorgensen's not been overly good either. He's made a couple of mistakes in the games he's played. And Maresca has made it very clear that Sanchez is first choice. So I think I would go for Verbruggen because he's cheaper. He's also got good fixtures, and I think he's very much first choice. But I think Sanchez is fine, and I would be choosing between those 2. By the way, they actually rotate incredibly well. So if you don't mind rotating goalkeepers on a wildcard, Sanchez and Verbruggen as a rotating pair, they'll serve you really well until your second wildcard, probably around Game Week 30. But other than that, I think Raya is probably quite a decent bet as well in goal. I just don't like how few saves he makes. He's a lot of money, especially if you want to afford some of those expensive attackers. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is the combination of Sanchez and Fabianski is actually quite good. And in Game Week 15, Sanchez has Spurs away and Fabianski has Wolves at home. So actually, they don't rotate terribly in the near term. So I really like the Sanchez pick. I know people won't like it themselves, but I kind of like having a bit of Chelsea defensive cover because if you look at expected data, they're in the top 5 for expected goals conceded. By all accounts, Chelsea haven't defended poorly this season. And when you look at their fixtures they've had to this point, they've not been as bad as maybe someone like an Arsenal or Wolves, but they've also not been brilliant. Like now is their nice fixture run. So I'm actually backing Chelsea to get a few clean sheets over this spell. That being said, this is not a game where I think it will be. It's the early kickoff off the back of an international break away against a Leicester team that like to score goals. So I'm not expecting a clean sheet this week, but I am very happy to have Sanchez in place. And I like the fact that I've got Fabianski on the bench too. When we move on to the defence, this is certainly the position where I see myself having to probably use a couple of transfers over the coming weeks. But I also don't want to rush the transfers in. The issue we're having with defenders is none of them are really standing. I can't think of a single defender this year that's been like, you've just got to have them in your team. I'm just not desperate to bring in anyone this week. And so I know I could look at it and see, like right now, this defense doesn't look great, but who am I bringing in this week that massively upgrades my defense? Maybe a Liverpool defender, right? But I can't afford one unless I make 2 transfers. So if I can't bring in a Liverpool defender, who's the only one that I'd really want for this week, who am I going out there and desperately buying? Like, Lewis Hall is fantastic. He really is. And he's got West Ham at home. I like it. But I don't necessarily ever expect that much from a defender that I'm bringing in. I mean, clean sheets don't exist really for a lot of teams. And attacking returns aren't coming that regularly. And they're not that consistent and predictable either. So I'm not saying that I won't make a defender transfer this week. But at the same time, I feel like if you've just got a defender that you think you're okay playing, then maybe just play them. And it may be a week more of information might be worthwhile. Because no, it's not a perfect defense this week, but it's not also too bad. So going through each of the players, Gabriel, very happy to have him. This is the fixture run to own him. Again, if we're referring back to wildcard, I've seen wildcard drafts without Gabriel. I hate it. He'd be the first defender on my list. Arsenal are going to improve defensively, and they've also not been that bad considering the fixtures. So I would absolutely have Gabriel. I know Ben White being out isn't great, but I still think Gabriel is an elite FPL option, and I'm very happy to have him. So he's the one in the team that is just going nowhere. And honestly, Ait-Nouri. Wolves will not keep clean sheets. Ait-Nouri, no, he won't get an attacking return every game. But over the next 6 to 8 games, I expect 2 to 3 returns from Ait-Nouri. And that will probably be 1 clean sheet and 2 attacking returns. That would be my prediction. If he gets 2 returns, that's also not awful. If we get into a point when he's only getting 1 return over the next 6, 7, 8 games, then that's probably a bit of a disaster. But like I said, I just don't think there are many cheap defenders that are very good for clean sheets or attacking returns. You're sort of taking a bit of a prediction on one of the two. So I like at least that Ait-Nouri's getting forward. He is on 4 yellow cards, remember? So ideally, he keeps extending that and he doesn't get that 5th yellow card. But when that happens, hopefully at that point, my defense is in a better situation to be able to deal with the suspension. So right now, Ait-Nouri and Gabriel are the 2 I'm happy with. And honestly, right now, I'm quite happy with Van den Berg. I don't suspect that he will stay in the team nailed in the long term, because I think once Ayer's back and once Henry's back, I think Van den Berg might drop out occasionally, especially over the busier period. And really, Brentford's fixtures aren't good coming up, and he doesn't carry much attacking threat, and they are not a good defence. So I don't really care if he's in the starting 11 or not. He's not great. But then remember, he's my cheap defender. He's supposed to be my 5th defender at 4.1 million. I bought him at 4 million, right? He's supposed to be the one that sits on the bench. The only reason I'm having to play him is because my other 2 defenders have difficult fixtures and one of them is a minutes risk. If I can get Van den Berg for the Everton and Leicester game over the next 2, which I think I should be able to, then after that, hopefully, I would have made enough defender transfers that he comes back onto the bench for me. So that's the plan. But this week, because Henry and Ayer probably aren't going to be available, I expect him to start. And Everton aren't attacking particularly well. We saw that with Fabianski getting a clean sheet last week. So I do think Brentford will concede at least 2 in this game. But out of the options that I've got, he's probably my best chance to start this week. And again, I might make a defender transfer. It might be best for my team. But am I that convinced that any of the other cheap defenders below about 5 million that I bring in will do that much better this week? Not necessarily. So honestly, like that back 3 is not perfection, but it's also not that bad. When I then look at the bench, Leif Davis, I'm probably going to keep him, right? Because he's got really decent fixtures after the Man United game for the next 4. And the reason that I am so specific on those next 4 fixtures, I just think Ait-Nouri's getting booked. He really is going to, right? The reason he is on that suspension tightrope is because he loves a booking. I don't see Ait-Nouri getting through the next 3, 4, 5 games without a booking. So I like that Davis, after the United game, if Ait-Nouri gets booked in any of the next 3 or 4, I'm so happy playing Leif Davis. So I just think he covers me well for the next 4 or 5 games. And again, no clean sheets. They're not going to happen for Ipswich, but he's got some attacking threat. And when the cheap defenders, like I said, I don't see many, other than maybe, again, Lewis Hall, that has both attacking threat and clean sheet potential, Leif Davis really isn't that bad for me. The player that I'm really not delighted with, and the one that I'd most likely like to take out, is actually Rico Lewis. maybe it's being overemphasized how bad he is, right? He could still get decent minutes. He is still playing for an okay defence in City, although they've definitely regressed this season. But the fixtures aren't really there until about game week 18 is when they start to really improve for City. And I don't think his minutes look particularly good coming up. We have seen now that on a consistent basis, Pep Guardiola does not want to play Rico Lewis against a tricky, attacking, fast left winger. As soon as we saw that Matoma battle in the Brighton game, we was like, Kyle Walker starts at right back. And we knew that was coming and it happened. The only reason Rico Lewis started that game is because Ake, Akanji, Diaz and Stones were all unavailable, which meant Gvardiol had to sit into centre-back, which meant Rico Lewis could go at left-back. So Gvardiol was not very good at centre-back. He's much better at left-back. So moving forward, in games where there is a winger that they don't think Rico Lewis can deal with, or Walker would be better skilled to deal with him, it will be Walker at right-back, Gvardiol at left-back, and then 2 centre-backs, whoever they may be. So what you're asking yourself then, and I think that will be the case for Spurs, I think it'll be Gvardiol at left-back, Walker at right-back, and then 2 of their fit centre-backs playing through the middle, even if it's Simpson, Pusi, and then, I don't know, Akanji or something like that. So the question is, do you think Lewis starts in midfield alongside Kovacic, or maybe instead of Kovacic alongside Gundogan? Assuming that their whole midfield is fit, and we get the press conference today from Pep Guardiola on the Friday, I don't think Lewis starts in midfield. I think their ideal setup would be Kovacic and Gundogan. If either of those aren't available for whatever reason, then maybe he does. I guess we just need to assess it. What I'm saying is, as long as Walker is fine, which we assume he is at the moment, I don't see that Rico Lewis starts ahead of Kyle Walker to deal with Heung-min Son. And especially the transition-based football that Spurs play, it suits a Kyle Walker game more than a Rico Lewis game. So my interpretation right now is Rico Lewis will be benched. But moving forward and just going forward with this team, he's then got Liverpool next week. And I just don't feel secure with these minutes. I can look at all of the games coming up and I'm like, oh, I could see Walker starting there. And I suppose he could start the odd game instead of Walker. And he could start instead of Gvardiol if they need to give him a rest. And he can start in midfield. And he is so cheap. But going into this busy period, what I want to start doing with my team is sorting the players out that I think are issues in terms of rotation and minutes. I want to get a team of where 13 or 14 of my players I feel like are pretty nailed on and are going to start most games. And Rico Lewis just isn't that for me. So as of right now, I don't think I need to sell Rico Lewis this week, but I am planning on selling him probably next week, if not this week. So I'll go through in the next section my current players that are on my watch list in terms of cheap defenders, because I'm probably looking at 3 or 4 cheap defenders below the price of 4.5. In terms of, like, do I try and find the money to get him up? I just think because of how many expensive attackers I want, any opportunity I get to remove money from my defense, I'm going to take it. So even if I was to sell Leif Davis coming up, I'd try and move to like a 4.3 or 4.4. I just want to take all of that money out of the defense if possible, because I just know there are so many expensive attackers I want. God, FPL Raptors truly back. 12 and a half minutes in that first section. That's the defense. No transfers planned this week at the moment. Let's rock with a slightly suboptimal team. Let's now take a look at the midfield 5. So moving on to the midfield, and I think this should be a slightly shorter section because I'm actually very happy with the midfield, as I've been saying since my wildcard in game week 7. And do I regret it? I'm going to say no, but the Dibbling pick, I always knew it was an issue in the future, and I always knew that it was an issue that I would want to address. I thought the issue would be easier to address because I didn't envision myself having Palmer, Salah and Haaland for this little spell here. But because I have the 3 of them, spoiler alert for the attack if you don't know my team, it does make it difficult because I'm already got so many enablers elsewhere. I don't really ever have the funds to get Dibbling up. And the thing is, even if I downgraded Lewis to someone like Lewis Hall instead, I honestly need about 1.2, 1.3 million to get from Dibbling to Semenyo. He's really the cheapest option outside of Rodgers that I'd actually want to own in my team at the moment, unless maybe Ahmad becomes an option. If Ahmad becomes an option under Amorim, that might save me. But I guess what I'm saying is I need to free up quite a lot of money to make the Dibbling move. And the reason I really want to sell him is we are, like I said, going into this busy period. I mean, it's end of November. November's gone incredibly quickly, but it's end of November now. Going into December, game week 14 is a midweek deadline. I need better cover. My cover at the moment is Lewis or Vandenberg and Davis. Like those 3 defenders are just not great. And then Dibbling. It's just not good because if I see rotation coming or I want to rotate my players, like Rodgers is great, as we'll discuss in a second, but I don't like having to start all of my attackers every week because if they don't have a good fixture or if they're an injury doubt, like luckily the update on Brian Mbeumo was really positive, but let's say it wasn't and I wanted to hold on to him, I wouldn't really have the option. I'd have to sell him. So yeah, Dibbling for me is an issue. But as of right now, I just every week I don't have the funds. So that's something I'll need to think about. If there is a way, without selling one of those 3 big boy premiums that I like having at the moment, to free up the funds to move Dibbling out. And maybe it is in the forward line probably, or that Brian Mbeumo position. And you know what? Let's start with Brian Mbeumo. Really nice to get a positive update on him because he's got Everton and Leicester in the next 2. I didn't want to sell him because the only player that I would want to sell Brian Mbeumo for was Bruno Fernandes. And before the Thomas Frank press conference, and by the way, in his press conference, Thomas Frank said that he expects Brian Mbeumo and Wissa and Pinnock, by the way, to all be available for the weekend. And we'll discuss more of the press conference updates in the deadline decisions video later. That's great, right? But the only player that I want to sell Mbeumo for would have been Bruno Fernandes. So I looked ahead of the press conference, like, is there a way for me to do it? And it would have been very, very difficult. So I'm glad that Brian Mbeumo's fine because the next 2 games against Everton and Leicester are brilliant. Beyond that, I still quite like the idea of keeping him unless I do need the funds or unless I just don't see something I like from Brentford. Because Brian Mbeumo in the difficult games, they often play a 3-5-2 where Brian Mbeumo plays up top alongside Wissa. The only thing that might chuck a spanner in the works there is Thiago, their very, very expensive signing, is now back. Could it be that they decide not to play that formation in those games? Potentially. Or might they want to play Brian Mbeumo out wide, maybe with Wissa on the left, with Thiago through the centre, something like that. So it could be that even in the more difficult games now, if they try and play all of their players, that Mbeumo is still wide. And in the easier games, he has been playing very well. Like, his goal threat is down this season. And as good as Mbeumo has been, I don't hate the idea of selling him. So I'm kind of open either way, and I think that's the best place to be. The issue we've got with Mbeumo is we bought him at such a cheap price, a lot of us, that we have a lot of money tied up. So if we decide to shift Mbeumo out and then want him back, it's a very expensive price to bring him back in. If I was on a wild card this week, I don't know if I'd have him. I might have Bruno Fernandes instead. And I think that's the debate you have to have with yourself is, do you have Mbeumo or Fernandes? I just don't think you have both. But for me and my team right now, I've got him and I'm very happy that he's fit and available. And I'll be keeping him at least for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. And I'll look and assess whether I need to sell him in the coming game weeks. I will just add on Brian Mbeumo. The great thing about him is he is a 90-minute man on penalties and set pieces, which is so good going into the busy period. So he is never a priority sell, even if the fixtures are awful, just because of everything he offers in terms of security of minutes. On Morgan Rogers, I'm actually so delighted that I kept him. I think he's one of the best midfielders to own in FPL at the moment because I think Aston Villa's fixtures are so underrated. Like, I think they're up there as some of the most underrated fixtures. Everyone's talking about, Bournemouth and Brighton got a really nice fixture run, and so do Newcastle and Chelsea and Arsenal, and Aston Villa's are so good over the next 4 or 5. They've got Crystal Palace at home, Brentford at home, and Southampton at home. 3 home fixtures in the next 4 against 3 defences that are really struggling. I see lots of goals for Aston Villa. Morgan Rogers has been struggling a little bit with fitness, right? At the start of the season, it was 90, 90, 90, 90. And then we've seen a lot of like 60-minute subs, even pre-60 at points. So he's clearly not able to play 90 minutes every single week at the moment. And they are still in the Champions League, of course, and they have midweek games too. So I'm not saying his minutes will be perfect, but so far he's been very nailed on in terms of starts. And I would expect that to continue. If you've not heard the rumblings coming out of Aston Villa, apparently Emery has been a man-possessed during the international break. And Emery is an absolute perfectionist. He's a very rare manager if you've heard sort of the stories about him. He does a lot of his own performance and match analysis. And I know a lot of, if not all managers will do some form of their own analysis, but every Premier League team, they hire analysts, and that's what they do, right? That is their sole job, is to analyse the games and give that information to the coaches who then watch the clips. I think, as far as I know, Emery does a ridiculous amount of that himself and then compares notes with the analyst. And apparently during the international break, a lot of the journalists are suggesting that Emery's basically not left the training ground and he has been trying to find solutions as to why Aston Villa have been struggling in recent weeks. And as much as, if you look at the points in the table, they're not doing too badly this season, the performances have certainly left a lot to be desired, and Aston Villa fans have been complaining a little bit. So if Emery can find a little bit more for Villa, and if he's found a new solution for them to do better, then that's obviously absolutely fantastic. The only concern would be if that solution involves Rodgers playing less or playing a deeper role, but we'd have to wait and see with that. I just think Rodgers has been so fantastic this season at his price, considering what he enables in my team. I'm happy starting Rodgers every game for the foreseeable future. Even next week against Chelsea, I wouldn't mind starting him. It's not ideal, but it's also not terrible. So I'm very happy, especially with those 3 home fixtures coming up, having Morgan Rogers in the starting 11. Which then leaves me with Palmer and Salah. two players that this week are both really good captaincy shouts. Palmer obviously is flagged at the moment along with Mbermo. We have seen him pictured in training. We would imagine that he's fit and available. I'm recording this before Maresca's press conference, but yeah, let's assume for now Palmer's available. If he's not, then I'll assess that afterwards. Honestly, I actually think the decision between Palmer, Salah, and also Haaland, who I'll discuss in a second, is very close this week. I do have the armband on Salah at the moment, but I'd love to know down below in the comments, is anyone tempted to captain Palmer this week? Because I think obviously Salah has been so consistent. He's got something like 7 double-digit hauls in 11 weeks, which is an absolute joke. We know how good he is for bonus points. And in terms of consistency, Liverpool and Salah are more consistent than Palmer and Chelsea from an FPL perspective. They just tick along. You expect that Liverpool will score 2 or 3 goals every week, and Salah is normally involved in at least one of them. And because of the bonus points, he is often getting 9-10 points with just 1 return. So Salah is super consistent. But if I was to flip the question and not look at consistency here and say, if I was to tell you that Palmer and Salah, not who scored which, but the two of them scored 21 and 9 points in game week 12, you'd guess the 20-plus pointer came from Palmer, I would imagine. Or 25 and 10. I guess for me, what I'm trying to say there is, maybe it is recency bias with the Brighton game, but Palmer just has that ability to go beyond nuclear. Salah, for me, in this current Liverpool setup, I know he obviously had that monster score against Man United, who he just loved playing against, and he's got 14 points against Villa. I do think Salah has up to 15 points in his locker quite comfortably, and maybe even 17. It might be famous last words. Salah doesn't strike me as 20-plus points at the moment, and you don't need a 40-point captaincy, right? And that's not what I guess you are aiming for it, but it's not what you're expecting in any given week. But Palmer's ceiling is just a joke. When he gets 1 goal early, you're always thinking, in a similar way to Haaland, 2, 3, 4. With Salah, and especially under slot, it just feels like they're happy winning 2 or 3-0, which I know is brilliant if you're a Liverpool fan, by the way. But from an FPL perspective, I don't sense that same like going for blood. I don't see that like they smell blood and just go for it. They don't feel as ruthless and cutthroat as they were under slot. So maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into doing something different for the sake of it. As of right now, with Ramsdale and Bednarek out, with Salah being so consistent, the bonus points, the fact that he got a full rest during the international break, I think everything is objectively pointing towards Salah being the best captaincy shout. So as of right now, I'm just trying to not overthink it and just go for Salah. I just think Palmer's got something about him where he could just go humongous. So I'm tempted. But as of right now, it's Salah. I'd love to know what you think down below in the comments, in the description, in the comments. So that's the current midfield situation. In terms of players that I want to bring in, I'd like to ideally have like Semenyo instead of Dibbling, and then I'd feel so much better because I just have more rotation. In terms of those big players that I want to bring in, it's obviously Bruno and Saka. I'm not desperate to bring in Saka right now because whilst the next 4 fixtures aren't bad, the likes of Forest, Man United, West Ham, they're also not brilliant. It's around game week 16 for me that I would like to bring Saka in, but I of course have to lose one of my other premiums who also have good fixtures then. So sadly, unless I get a big injury to one of my premiums, Saka's probably not coming into the team for a little while as of right now. And same with Bruno Fernandes. He's obviously a little bit cheaper, so there is the possibility to try and get Mbermo up to Fernandes. But fixtures-wise, after the Ipswich and Everton games, they run out a little bit for Manchester United, and I kind of want to see how we get on under Amorim. So I do think Fernandes and Saka are both brilliant options, especially this week, but I just don't see a route into my team for them for now. So that's the midfield. Let's move on to the 3 forwards. So moving on to the 3 forwards, and at the moment I have Rao and Cunha facing off against each other in the Wolves versus Fulham game, and I also have Erling Haaland to complete my Palmer, Salah, Haaland trio that I do still own, and they are causing me issues in terms of lack of flexibility with budget. But I also think when I look at that starting 11, and instead of Vandenberg, put Lewis back in, and imagine that instead of Lewis, like I could have Luca Dean, Lewis Hall. So don't focus on the personnel, but the price points. I've got Sanchez in goal. I've got a premium defender. I've got a couple of cheap defenders as well. I've got Salah, Palmer, Haaland, 2 cheap forwards, but there are so many good cheap forwards at the moment. I've got Brian Mbermo, and Rodgers is so good at his price that I don't mind starting him most weeks. I don't feel like I am massively missing out on that much, other than a bit more squad depth, and then those mid-price assets that are starting to creep into our thinking more and more. And this is the issue, is that a few weeks ago, we were like, oh, the likes of Bruno and Isak and Jackson and Solanke, like, don't really that desperate to own them. But right now, I'd like to own Bruno, Jackson, Isak, right? These are players that I do want to own now. So it comes a point when it's like, yeah, if you sell Erling Haaland, you sell Erling Haaland, which isn't great, but then you can gain, like if I sold Haaland and Dibbling, I could gain Isak and Saka. And then everyone's like, how would you still own Erling Haaland? And listen, I get it. But at the same time, that would then mean benching Rodgers this week, who I think is really, for his value, even if you ignore his value, Rodgers is just a great player to have this week. So anyway, we're going to get into all of that. Starting actually with Raul Jimenez. He played on the Wednesday morning UK time for Mexico. He played 89 minutes. I do have slight worries as to whether he's going to get good minutes in this game. We will point to the fact that in the previous two international breaks, after the international break, in which he played again, early hours or late hours of Tuesday evening, going into early hours of Wednesday morning, he played 72 minutes for Fulham and 90 minutes for Fulham. So he has played and started 2 games after the international breaks in a row, but he's played so many games in a row now for Fulham and for Mexico that fitness and fatigue is accumulative. And this is what people aren't considering, that when he had that first international break, he hadn't started a single game for Fulham at that point. By the second international break, he'd only started a few. He's now started something like 8 or 9 games in a row, so it's going to eventually catch up on him. I do just wonder, is this a game where we could see Muniz get a start? I'm still of the opinion that Raul probably starts this, but I don't expect that he gets more than sort of 65, 70. I think he could get an earlier sub, but we know that Wolves aren't good defensively. I know I have 8 Nuri, but it does feel like a really nice fixture for Raul Jimenez. So unless I know for a fact we get a leak of some kind that Raul Jimenez isn't starting, I'm going to keep him for this week. The 2 games after, I actually think could suit him quite well. It's Spurs and Brighton. But remember that game week 14 is a midweek fixture. And with these minutes, they've dropped off slightly in some of the recent weeks. Ignore the siren in the background. I'm just not sure that I want to hold on to Raul Jimenez in the long term. And then after that, he's got Arsenal and Liverpool. So Raul Jimenez is a player that I could see myself keeping for as many as the next 3 game weeks, but also he could make way even this week or next week. The obvious replacement is João Pedro, right? At 5.5 million, I think he is now. He's gone up in price. He's cheaper than Raul Jimenez. Even if Jimenez was to fall again and João Pedro was to rise again, it's still like a straight swap at that point. So I have the money available to just make that move. And with how good João Pedro looked off the bench, with all of the quotes going around from Hertzler, with the penalties, with the fixtures, especially next week against Southampton at home, it just looks like the perfect pivot point. So as of right now, Raul to João Pedro has been penciled in for next week. I just don't think it makes sense to make the move this week, right? João Pedro's got Bournemouth away. Raul Jimenez has Wolves at home. I'd probably prefer to have Raul Jimenez. And I don't think João Pedro gets more, probably, than 65, 70 minutes himself. So yeah, not a long-term player in my team, I wouldn't imagine, but also pretty happy to have for this week. Cunha's an interesting one. If I didn't own Cunha right now, I wouldn't be desperate to bring him in for the next couple. Fulham and Bournemouth aren't pushovers. They're 2 decent defences, especially Fulham away at Craven Cottage. That's not an easy game. And honestly, the Southampton game, apart from that one chance at the start for Sarabia, Wolves didn't really create that much. And I still think Cunha's great. And I still think if you're looking for a long-term option and you don't want to move that position around, Cunha is great. But I don't think you need him for the next 2 or 3. I think it's around that West Ham Ipswich game, let's say around 15, 16. He does have a really nice run a few games then. But I definitely think you can bet against him. I don't think he's essential, especially as he obviously keeps going up in price. He's starting to approach like 7 million soon. At that point, it's like, yeah, he's still okay value, but it does get a little bit expensive, especially when you do have someone like João Pedro at 5.5 million. I would be very tempted to go there instead, potentially. But myself, Raul and Cunha, absolutely fine having, which then brings us on to the main man, Erling Haaland. I'm going to discuss Erling Haaland in a bit more detail in one of the future sections of this video. It's probably going to be a long video, but it's been a while since I've uploaded. Because when I plan ahead, I think that the best time to own Haaland will be around 17, 18 onwards. But I also think that I don't mind having him from around 15, 16 onwards as well. It's really the next few games against Spurs, not even Spurs, but Liverpool, Forest, if Man United improve. That could be a little bit tough, but when I actually compare the fixtures to Salah after Southampton's got City, Newcastle, Everton. Haaland's got Liverpool, so they play against each other, then Forest and Palace. And then after that, Salah's got Fulham, who have been very good defensively. Haaland's got Man United at home. I don't know that Salah's fixtures are that much better than Haaland's. And I'm not saying this to try and cope because I own them both. I want them both to do well, right? So I have that nice position that I'm in. But I'm not that convinced that Salah's fixtures are that much better over the next 5. And then after that, they both go on an incredibly good fixture run. So I guess my thought process at the moment, and this will make more sense when we look at my team moving forward, I'm going to sort of plan ahead with you a little bit later. I think that the best structure moving forward might still be Salah and Haaland, if you can afford it. And if you can find ways to get enablers into your team that don't massively detriment where you're trying to get to in the busy period. It does mean that you might not be able to have Saka, Bruno, Isak, which people won't like, but when you look at Haaland's fixtures from game week 18 onwards, he plays against the likes of like Brentford, Ipswich, I think like Leicester, like these are games that you're going to want to captain and own Haaland for. And I just think City, right, Pep Guardiola's just signed a contract extension. Haaland has been scoring goals over the international break. KDB should be coming back soon. They're getting some of their centre-backs fit. This is the period where City often just go absolutely ballistic and they just don't drop points. So there's a lot of narrative bias in there, and it might be that Haaland continues to struggle. I just think sooner rather than later he's going to start putting the ball in the back of the net. I wonder if you've almost missed the boat a little bit to sell Haaland. I'm starting to think I might try to hold on to him if I can and find other ways to use my transfers. But he is very expensive. And again, I am missing out on the likes of Isak, who I really want in my team, and Saka, who is so consistent for his price. So I don't know. I guess what I do know is I'm not selling Erling Haaland this week. I genuinely think Haaland is as good of a captaincy option as Salah and Palmer. I think it's really close. Spurs look like they'll be. We haven't had Postecoglou's press conference at the time of me recording this. Looks like they'll be without Romero and Van der Ven. Haaland against Davis and Dragusin. Against Davis and the Dragon. I'm not saying they're bad footballers. They are significantly better than I will ever be. But that's not Romero and Van der Ven. And Spurs have been capitulating recently, right? Really bad results. They're not playing well anyway. I've seen a few suggestions, I'm not saying this, that the players aren't really playing for Ange at the moment. They've lost faith and hope a little bit. Let's see. They might have like a post-international break bounce where they start to improve. But at home, this does feel a little bit set up for an Erling Haaland monster haul. And I'm hoping so, because the patience that I've shown this man after what he did to me at the start of the season to bring him in and all the blanks. So I kind of need it for my own sanity at this point. But yeah, that's the team at the moment. There is it in its entirety. As you can see, I don't think I need a transfer this week. All right? I've got the 3 major players covered. I've got some really nice options outside of that, like Mbeumo, Rodgers, Rao, Cunha, all with okay fixtures. The defense is all okay as well. Sanchez is nice this week. It's a nice team. I would love Bruno. I'd love Isak. I'd love Saka, but I don't want to sell Haaland this week, and I don't want to bench Rodgers. Because if I did Haaland and Dibbling, not only would I be losing Haaland for this week, I'd be benching Rodgers for a really nice fixture. Or Cunha, which I'm not, again, that desperate to do. So yeah, that's the team at the moment. Let me know what you think of it. Let me know what you would do. Let's now take a look at my watch list, the players that I'm considering, and then we'll do a little bit of live tinkering and planning ahead in the final section as well. So very briefly, before we plan ahead and show you my team for future weeks and the moves that I'm currently considering and when I might need to make certain transfers, let's firstly look at which players I'm on my watch list at the moment for the next few weeks at least. So starting with the defenders, I've narrowed my defender options down to 3, but really I'm a bit hesitant on this because if I look at the weeks when I need a defender, right? If I look at defender rotations, and what I would do is in a really basic way, either go to Fantasy Football Hub and enter your team ID and go through and look at which weeks you need a defender. Or if you want to do an easier version, just open up a spreadsheet, just type in which weeks you are a bad fixture for some of your defenders, mark it red, and then go and look at a defender that has good fixtures in that week. Like you can do it, or you can even do it by pen and paper if you want to go full old school. In the weeks when I need defenders, Van Heck and Cole will serve me best. Brighton and Chelsea's fixtures rotate really well with Gabriel, Ait-Nouri and Leif Davis, and maybe Vandenberg if I need him, who are my current defenders. I might end up making another transfer, but if I do just sell Rico Lewis, Van Heck and Cole will certainly fill in best for my team. But I think Lewis Hall is the most exciting of the 3. Like, if I'm looking at defenders that really excite me and have not only clean sheet potential, not only decent fixtures, but also a bit of attacking threat, Lewis Hall has to be the one. And he's still at a really cheap price. But fixtures-wise, it just doesn't suit my team as well. I also think that out of the 3, Hall is the biggest rotation risk. And I still think he's very, very nailed on in terms of he's their first choice starting left back. But could I see in a midweek game or over the busy period him getting 1 or 2 games off? You could. And then as soon as he gets 1 rest, you're then just doubting the pick and you're starting to think, oh, will he get a second rest? And if he does get a second rest, then at that point, even if he is still first choice, you've always got that doubt in your mind, which just isn't nice. It's sort of what's happened with Rico Lewis recently. So Yeah, I don't know at the moment. I'm probably leaning Van Heck, or Van Hecker, I think is how you pronounce it. But I just think it suits my team more, and it's a bit boring and dull. In terms of why not Lewis Dunk, he's still not fully fit, I don't believe. Even if he is back, I have seen some Brighton fans calling for Igor to continue starting at left centre-back because he's left-footed. And apparently, I don't watch Brighton enough, but the system just looks more fluid with Igor at left-back due to being left-footed, and Van Hecker is just too good to drop. So maybe Lewis Dunk isn't fully nailed on. The other Brighton defender you could go for is Estepinian, because of course Kadioglu is out for what looks like 1 to 2 months, I believe. So he's not going to be available. But even if Kadioglu is out, Brighton fans are suggesting that Estepinian's role in this current team isn't that attacking anyway. And they do have enough defenders to not start Estepinian every single game anyway. So considering how expensive he is, I just don't, it doesn't sound like he offers enough. So I probably would just go Van Hecker at the moment out of all of the cheap defenders. I also like Luca Dean. Now, I don't know what to make of him because if you played FPL for a while, he is a bit of a troll. We've got bad experiences with him. But he so far this season, he's been so nailed, really attacking. He looks so good in the international break as well, getting a few returns in a single game. He just looks so good. And actually, Aston Villa's defensive data has been brilliant. We spoke about the fixtures as well. If we jump over, I don't actually think from a defensive perspective they're as good, but the next few are just, and I mean, up until look at the amount of green fixtures they've got. So the next 4, Palace, Brentford, Southampton at home are all obviously great. Forest away is a really nice fixture from a defensive perspective. I quite like that. They have a few trickier games here. Leicester's even not that great. Everton's a decent one. This is a nice little run here. But if he rotates in, which he rotates okay for me at the moment, but like I kind of need a defender, for example, in 17, 18 and 22. And in those weeks, it's just, in my team, it doesn't suit as much. But I also feel like he's a player that's going under the radar due to his previous seasons. And as of this season, what we've seen from him is really good underlying data and playing in a defence that I know haven't kept many clean sheets. Like, it has been well documented that Villa haven't been keeping the clean sheets, but they have been showing good underlying data, which is what we look at in terms of predicting future clean sheets. So I do really like him. And then the only other player is obviously Konate. I just can't easily get to Konate, but if I had the funds, he's just the standout option below 5.5 million for me. In midfield, we've spoken about this already, but at the cheaper price, it's Semenyo and Matoma. I probably still would go Semenyo, but he is on 4 yellow. So maybe there is a cheeky punt on Matoma in there. I just think if Ruta starts and Welbeck or Ferguson starts, you could see João Pedro chucked out on the left, which might mean Matoma gets a rest. But I don't mind a punt on Matoma with Brighton's fixtures. Gordon's in that in-between price. If I can maybe sell Mbeumo coming up, Mbeumo to Gordon or Barnes. Newcastle, I do like their fixtures as well. And then Bruno and Saka, I would love to own both of them, but it just comes down to funds. For the forward positions, it's 3 for me. It's Isak, Jackson and João Pedro. There are other forwards that you could consider, absolutely. Watkins, with the fixtures coming up. If Emery has tweaked something during the international break and he can find form for Ollie Watkins, those fixtures are a joke. But really, it's if I can afford him, Isak, and if I can't afford him, probably João Pedro. I've gone off Jackson slightly. The 4 yellow cards isn't ideal. And if I come back over to the official site, if we just go on Chelsea's fixtures, they've got Leicester. I expect Jackson to start. They've got Villa. I'd expect Jackson to start. The Wednesday game is Southampton. Nkunku has been starting the midweek games, the European games. Is it because it's midweek or is it because it's European? I'd assume it's the midweek element. Do I think that between Villa and Southampton, Nkunku starts this? Yes, I do. I don't think Jackson starts it at the moment. And he's on 4 yellows. So what you could get, and this is worst case scenario, is starts Leicester, starts Villa, doesn't start Southampton, gets booked against Southampton when he comes off the bench, and then doesn't play here. Or plays here, which would be even worse, and then gets booked against Spurs, and then misses Southampton. I guess what I'm saying is my prediction now, and it is a bold prediction, and Jackson could comfortably outscore Isak and João Pedro. My prediction is he misses 2 of the next 5 due to 1 booking and 1 rest. I guess your best case scenario probably in that situation is that he gets booked against Villa because this is the game you expect him to miss anyway. But then what his fixtures are is Leicester, Villa, Spurs over the next 3. I just think I prefer Isak as well. And even without all of that stuff, right? Let's say that I'm just building a narrative that doesn't exist. I just think Isak's a better asset. Penalties, equally good data, and just more nailed on for minutes, I think. So, yeah, I just think Isak's better than Jackson for me. I'd be going there. But João Pedro's the one I want. I really do. And I think it's going to be for, like I said, Raul Jimenez next week. So that's my watch list. this video is going to be so long, but let's now take a look at planning ahead and what my plan is for future weeks, and it might get a bit messy. So guys, for this final section, I just thought I'd plan ahead. This is going to be a little bit rough, chaotic, and the video is already very long, so feel free to click off now. But if you do click off, then please make sure you subscribe when you leave. If you do enjoy this sort of thing, then let me know down below in the comments. I am using Fantasy Football Hub. As I said, they are currently offering a 30-day free trial. So I know I always say this is the best time to sign up, but this probably is the best time to sign up because you are going to get that opportunity to have a free trial before you decide if you think it's worth your money or not. And so, yeah, give it a go, check it out. And if you do then decide to sign up, my link will allow you to get 30% off as well. It obviously supports me and the channel too. So for Game Week 12, let's assume that I do decide, I'm going to move the microphone slightly, decide that I don't make a transfer and that I am going to just roll. That will mean that going into Game Week 13, I will have 3 free transfers. And my plan at the moment is to, well, actually, I don't really know, I guess is my plan. My plan is to decide if I want to sell Erling Haaland. That's going to be the really key thing. And I think most people will look at it and just say, let's see how he performs against Spurs, I suppose, but he's not really worth the money. There are loads of cheap assets that are doing better. Your squad needs a bit of fixing. Like, you've got Dibbling in, you've got the cheap defenders. Like, use that money and get the players you want to own. And like I said, if I sell Haaland, I can get Isak in there, I can get Saka in there, I can upgrade Dibbling. Like, it's just such a massive set of upgrades. So there is the possibility to do that. So let's firstly show you the route where I sell Erling Haaland, because he does have Liverpool, Forest, United, Villa in the next sort of 5 after that, which isn't an ideal set. And I'm not really planning on captaining him in many or any of those. So it would be Haaland to Isak. I do feel like this isn't the best entry point for Isak next week. I'll be honest. I think Game Week 12 or Game Week 15 is probably the best entry point against either West Ham or Brentford. I don't think Crystal Palace or Liverpool is the best entry point, but you're sort of owning him for those long-term fixtures. And where I really want Isak is Brentford, Leicester, Ipswich. That run of 3 fixtures is absolutely unbelievable. So it would be Isak in. I think it would be Saka instead of Bruno then in for Dibbling. So let me make that move there. And then what I would do, I've got 1.3 million in the bank, but it would probably be Raul to João Pedro. I wouldn't even use that money. And that would be my 3 free transfers used. I'd then at that point have the opportunity, if I wanted to take a hit, to bring in Saliba or Konate or someone like that. It wouldn't be Konate that week because of City and Newcastle, but maybe like Saliba in for Lewis to then give me double Arsenal defence if I wanted it. Like, I have options, but that would all be for a hit. So let's say that I make those transfers, then I optimise the team. The team just looks so much better in general. Like, the defence still looks the same, right? Because I haven't used the transfer there yet. But then it's Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Burmo, Isak, Cunha, João Pedro, then with Rodgers as my 8th attacker, rotating with João Pedro. It's just so nice. It just looks so much better. Does it give me a benching headache? Yeah, absolutely. Like, the weeks coming up, there will be really tough decisions, but that's a better position to be in. And then when I look at penalty takers, Salah, Palmer, Saka, Mbeumo, Isak, Cunha, João Pedro. I've got 7 penalty takers in there as well. I really want to hold on to Erling Haaland. I do, because I think from 18 and beyond, he's going to be worthwhile having. It's just difficult to sit there and look at those moves, which then leaves me with 1.4 million in the bank, and to say hold on to him. But I do think that, like, if he goes and bags a couple against Spurs, it's going to be very difficult for me to sell him, because I know all you're going to be thinking about if you don't own Haaland is, how do I get Haaland back? So for me to now sell him, it's like, have I not missed the boat? But is this now the time when I go slightly differential and just try and hang on to him? Maybe in future videos, I'll show you, maybe like next week, we'll discuss the pros and cons, but because it will take too long to show you the 2 different paths. But I do think that the optimal and sensible path probably is to just remove Haaland, because I could fall so far behind that by game week 18, when I am so proud that I held Erling Haaland for this spell, well, then those people that didn't hold him and sold him and spread the funds might be like 80 points ahead of me, that they can go and take a -12 hit to go and bring Haaland back in and still be up. So I need to be careful that I don't hold on to him for the sake of it. By the way, captaincy is going to be a nightmare this week. In game week 13, I might go Mbeumo or Palmer. I'll probably go Palmer, to be honest. Yeah, let's say Palmer for now. But it's going to be definitely an interesting discussion next week, captaincy. In terms of full team, At this point, I'm ideally liking, like, can I just roll a couple of transfers? You know, I need to click optimize so I get Saka into the 11. This, again, is the benching headache situation. Am I benching João Pedro against Fulham? Not ideally. Do I bench Isak because he's got Liverpool? But then it's Alexander Isak. It's going to be really difficult every week. But my defense has decent fixtures in this. If I've still got Lewis at this stage, which I might, could he be back in the 11 and starting? Could I play him? Maybe. But I don't need to if I don't want to. Like, Lewis could just sit on my bench. I could also make a defender transfer at this point. I've got 1.4 in the bank. So this might be the point that I say, do you know what? I'm going to go out there and get Konate, which I could absolutely do. I'm not going to plan out transfers every week. Remember that this is a midweek deadline. So the fact that I've got João Pedro, Lewis, and Van den Berg, all with okay fixtures that are sat on the bench, that's nice. I think it'll be nice to have some cover. I've also got Fabianski against Leicester. If this wasn't a midweek deadline, it's definitely a possible bench boost when you look at that. Like Fabianski against Leicester on the bench, if he's still playing at that point, it's very nice. In 15, the defence is still looking okay. And this is what I meant by, like, if I can just get through the next couple, the fixtures start to align. Obviously, dependent upon Aït-Nouri's yellow card situation, Saka's obviously not going to be on the bench in a million years. Okay, honestly, I don't know who I bench in any given week. This is going to be the issue if I make the move to sell Haaland, but it might be Cunha against West Ham away here or something like that. So I guess what I'm saying is once I make that move to shift Haaland, apart from just sorting out a couple of the surrounding issues and obviously dealing with injury, suspension, rotation, all of that lovely stuff that we get over this period, it's looking pretty good every single week. And I know people might point to then Brian Mbeumo around this point. I'm not that desperate to remove Brian Mbeumo. I mean, Semenyo, let's look at the fixtures that Semenyo has for when, yeah, I mean, they are better, aren't they? So Semenyo will go into Spurs, Ipswich, West. They're better, but not that better. And again, if he's not got his 5th yellow at that point, it's just such a risk associated with it. I might just hold Brian Mbeumo. I suppose this is a point where, let's say that Amorim just looks ridiculous with Man United. Bruno's basically playing as like a not false 9, but like a second striker. He's getting in loads of really good positions. Even with the fixtures, it might be like, damn, I need to get Bruno Fernandes into my team. So like that's a possibility. But I don't know. I've been like planning ahead, and like if I make that move to shift Haaland, I guess it does put me in a position where, all going well, I could potentially, like, the rotation just works really nicely. Rodgers bench against City here. Going forward, it's just that I'd probably, around this point, because I'm starting Leif Davis and Van den Berg a lot, I probably do need to make a defender transfer. It might be that this is the point when I say, do you know what? Probably Lewis out for Konate in one of these weeks, make the transfer, and just get Konate into the team instead of Leif Davis. Because as much as I love Leif Davis, like, it's not playing for a great defence, and the attacking threat isn't going to save you every single week. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that it's all going to be dependent upon like what happens in terms of things that you don't expect over this period. Because I think the thing with the Game Week 12, I'm just rambling at this point, but the thing with the Game Week 12 fixture swings is the teams that you want to bring in for Game Week 12, they just have like elongated, nice fixtures over quite a long run. So if you have Aston Villa, Chelsea, Brighton, Bournemouth, Newcastle assets in place, Arsenal assets, once you get them in place, you're then sort of there twiddling your thumbs a bit, because I don't want to sell Salah, Palmer, and Mbeumo, Rodgers, or Saka. I don't want to sell Isak or João Pedro. At the moment, it doesn't feel like that anyway. So you put them in, and Cunha. Like when I look at those 8 attackers, why would I want to sell any of them? And I'm not saying there won't be opportunities, but so this this is when it comes back to just like sort of that passive management of like, do you just get to a stage where you try and roll as many? But like I said, because then from sort of 18 onwards, when Haaland has Everton, he then goes on a really, really nice run of fixtures. So I would say around 18, if we can get to a position when we've got like 4 or 5 free transfers that we can stack up, that allows us to then pivot back to a draft where Haaland is in it, I think that makes a lot of sense. The issue is Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Haaland all have ridiculous fixtures over that spell. Let's go. Actually, do you know what we'll do? We'll go to fixture analyzers, probably the easiest way to do it. I don't know how this is going to look on your screen. We might need to cut. No, that might look okay. So if we go from like 18 to like 23, this little spell here, Man City have Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. You're not telling me you're going to go without Erling Haaland for Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. They are 5 horrible defences. Leicester, Brentford and Ipswich in particular, over those 4 games, they're just games you want Erling Haaland for. But then in that spell, Liverpool have Leicester, West Ham, United, Forest, Brentford, Ipswich. You want Salah. But then Chelsea have Fulham, Ipswich, Palace, Bournemouth, Wolves. You want Palmer. And then Arsenal have Ipswich, Brentford, Brighton, Spurs, Villa, Wolves. Again, you probably want Bukayo Saka. So you might come back to the point that actually I don't want to have Haaland then because I can cover with the captaincy. I just don't think you go without Haaland, especially if at that point City is starting to fire again and De Bruyne is fit for that silly run of fixtures. So I think it's actually Saka of the 4 that I'd want to sacrifice there, which means that I'm pivoting away from Haaland to then come back to Haaland, which isn't a huge issue, but then that comes back to the idea of do I just hold on to him? So these are the things that I'm thinking about right now. If I just show you back to my team then before I end this incredibly long video, this is where I'm currently at. In terms of this week, I don't think I need a transfer. It's not perfect, but there's not many places I feel like are a massive upgrade. And then going into next week, my big decision is, do I sell Haaland? And if so, I can foresee myself using all 3 of my free transfers to pivot to something like Isak, Saka, and then João Pedro, which is just an insane set of 3 upgrades that probably does benefit my team overall. So guys, there we have it, back with a bang with an incredibly long video, and it is one of 2 uploads today, so there'll be a deadline decisions video later today as well. Thank you for your patience with me not uploading, and thank you for all of the kind words as well. I appreciate it more than you know. I've read every single one of your messages and kind words, and it means so much to me. So thank you. I will see you later today for the deadline decisions, and thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.